Okay, so let's continue with our next video in our practice exam question series for AWS Certified Developer Associate exam. So let's read question number 31. A developer has an application that store data into S3 bucket. So some application is storing data into S3 bucket. The application uses HTTP API to store and retrieve objects. So this application is using some API, that is HTTP API. When the put object API require operation adds object to the S3 bucket, the developer must encrypt these objects at rest by using server-side encryption with Amazon S3 managed key. Because application in the application we are using HTTP API. So when we call the HTTP API, we are calling this API put object because we are putting some object. And what we want is when we put some object into S3 bucket, so at that time it should be encrypted. So while at rest it should be encrypted. So only at the rest. So we don't care about the transit. That is when it transferring, but just when it rest it should be encrypted. And encryption should be SSCS3. So SSCS3 basically a type of encryption which is on the server side, that is on the S3 side. So if you just enable on the S3 side, it will be encrypted. Which solution will meet this requirement? Create an AWS KMS key, assign the KMS key to the S3 bucket. So this looks wrong because if you create a KMS key, then it means like you are managing or AWS is managing the key, but you are creating that key. But here we need to do using SSCS3. So SSCS3 is like we don't need to we don't need to create an KMS key. This is the inbuilt. Set the X Amazon server-side encryption header when invoking the put object API operation. This look correct because we are calling the HTTP API. Within that, like we have to pass the header, and in that header we have to set this encryption header. We have to set X Amazon server-side encryption header. Provide the Let's suppose if you don't know whether B is correct or not, so let's try to go with the elimination approach. Provide the encryption key in the HTTP header. So if you provide the encryption key, it means still you are providing from the customer end, but that looks wrong because in SCCS3 we don't manage the encryption key. It is at the AWS end only. So C is also wrong. Apply the TLS to encrypt the traffic. So TLS is just to when we are like transferring the data. But in our case, we have to make sure the encryption should be at rest. So D is also wrong. So what is the remaining? B is remaining. So B is the correct answer. Question number 32. A developer needs to perform geographic load testing of an API. So there is some API, he wants to do some load testing geographically, maybe in different AWS regions. The developer must deploy resources to multiple AWS regions. That looks correct because he wants to do some testing of API in multiple locations. So it means that application should also be available into the multiple locations. The developer must deploy resources to multiple AWS region to support the load testing. How can the developer meet this requirement? So if he has to create a, let's suppose there are 10 AWS region in which he wants to do the load testing. So how he can create those resources? There are multiple ways, either do manually or using cloud formation or so many ways, right? But what is the easiest way or less operational, we can say? Create and deploy an AWS Lambda function in each desired region. Configure the Lambda function to create a stack from an AWS CloudFormation template. In this, like we can't say like this is wrong. This is correct as well, but we have to see like out of which option easiest way or less operational overhead. If you are going to create a, let's suppose a 10 region, we have to create a Lambda function all that, and from that Lambda function we are creating a CloudFormation template. Not ideal. Create an AWS CloudFormation template that define the load test resources. This looks correct because we can directly create a resource using CloudFormation rather than first create a Lambda and the Lambda is going to create a CloudFormation. No, we can create a CloudFormation template. Use the AWS CLI create stack set command. This looks correct because you have to create a multiple you have to create a resource in the multiple regions. When you have to create into the multiple region, the best option is to create a stack set which is going to create so many stack into the multiple regions uh, in the desired region. B can be the answer. Create an AWS system manager document that define the resources. Use the document to create a no. So that is wrong. Create an AWS cloud formation template that define the test is correct. Use the AWS CLI deploy command to create a stack in each region. So in the B and C, there is only small difference. In the B, it is mentioned use the create stack set command. In the D, they said use the deploy command. The deploy command is not the correct way, because if you use the deploy command, so what you are doing is, let's suppose you have to deploy into 10 region. So when you run the AWS CloudFormation deploy command, you have to pass the region. And you can pass only one region. So it means you deploy in first region, then run the same command in second region, then run the same command in third, then run the same command in fourth, which is like more tedious. But in this case, you are creating a stack, and then you can deploy by passing the multiple regions within a same command. So B looks correct. Question number 33. A developer is creating an application that includes an API gateway in the US East 2 region. So some application which is using API gateway, and that is in the US East 2 region. So region is US East 2. The developer wants to use Amazon CloudFront and a custom domain name for the API. So he want to use CloudFront as well, which is a global service, and he want to use the domain name of the API. He want to give some like some domain name, maybe like facebook.com or something like .com, example.com. The developer has acquired a SSL TLS certificate for the domain from the third party. So he has already acquired the certificate from the third party, not from the AWS. How should the developer configure the custom domain for the application? All right. So when we are like creating that, so we like that certificate should be available uh, into the AWS, and within the AWS we have the service called AWS Certificate Manager. Right. So let's go to the option. Import the SSL TLS certificate ACM in the same region as the API. Totally wrong, because application is in the US East 2, and when because the application is actually using CloudFront, right? And a CloudFront is a global service, all right? So when you are going to deploy the certificate, so you can't deploy the certificate into the same region, which is the like in the which in which your application is running. It should be always in the US East 1. Otherwise, like when you create a CloudFront, and at that time of creation, there is an option, okay, select the certificate. You will not able to see the certificate into the drop down list if you create a certificate into the US East 2 region. So if you have to attach the certificate using CloudFront, the certificate should always be available into the US East 1. So A is wrong. Import the SSL TLS certificate into CloudFront, wrong. We have to import into ACM. Import the certificate into ACM in the same region as the API, totally wrong. Import the certificate into ACM in the US East version, that is correct, because we have to always make sure the certificate is available in US East 1, and create a DNS code. Even we using the elimination approach, D is correct. Question number 24. A developer is creating a template that uses CloudFormation to deploy an application. So he was using CloudFormation to deploy an application. The application is serverless and uses API gateway, Amazon DynamoDB, and Lambda. So all three are the serverless services. Which AWS service tool should the developer use to define serverless resources in YAML? So like he's creating a template to deploy CloudFormation that uses CloudFormation. So either you can deploy using SAM template, or because SAM is just to deploy the serverless application, or you can use the CloudFormation template. So CloudFormation serverless intrinsic function, totally wrong. Intrinsic functions are basically used within the template to get some domain name. There are so many functions. Elastic Beanstalk, totally wrong. This is not a serverless. SAM template, correct, because SAM template is only to deploy the serverless services into the AWS. And we created a SAM template, and at the backend, all the CloudFormation is only going to use a CDK. CDK is via the code, not via the template. So C is the correct. Question number 35. A developer wants to insert a record into a DynamoDB table as soon as new file is added into S3 bucket. So what he want, as soon as we insert into file into S3 bucket, some record, maybe metadata, insert into DynamoDB. So we need to add some kind of a trigger, right? uh, or some kind of functionality, right? Create an event with Amazon event bridge that will monitor the S3 bucket. And no, because S3 like already has the event trigger kind of thing. You don't need to monitor the S3 bucket. Configure an S3 event, yes, to invoke a Lambda function, and that is going to insert a record dynamo. Yes, perfectly correct. Create a AWS Lambda function that is going to poll the S3 bucket. No, you don't need to regularly poll the content into the S3 bucket. Uh, all right, so otherwise the Lambda is going to run continuously. But whenever like any event is going to be occur, at that time Lambda will be triggered. So B looks correct. Create a cron job that is going to schedule timer and insert the record. No, so B is the correct answer. Question number 36. A development team maintains a web application by using single AWS CloudFormation template. Okay, the template defines web server and database. The team uses the CloudFormation template to deploy CloudFormation stack to different environments. Okay. During a recent application deployment, the developer caused the primary development database to be dropped or recreated because he is creating the database using CloudFormation template. So when you deploy the CloudFormation template, the resources are getting deleted and recreated. All right. Maybe if you delete the stack, then the resources are getting recreated. But then it will be a worse, all right, because you are creating a database using CloudFormation template, and if you by mistake delete the stack, then the database is also going to be deleted, and same thing is going to happen. The result, this result of the incident was a loss of data because we lost the data. What should the developer do to avoid this kind of failure or accidental database deletion into the future? So when you create a CloudFormation template and whenever you could see, okay, we are defining a database or anything which is important. So make sure just modify the template and add the delete retention policy set to true for the particular resource. Then whenever you like create a stack, delete the stack or whatever you do, that particular delete retention, it means the particular resource is not going to be get deleted. So that is one way you can do that. Let's go through the option and we need to choose two. Add a CloudFormation deletion policy attributes with the retain value to the database resource. Correct. And within the database resource, we can set an attribute like delete retention to true, and then if you delete the stack, then the particular database is not going to be deleted. The remaining source is going to be deleted. So this is definitely the correct. Update the CloudFormation stack policy to prevent updates to the database. That can be also option. Modify the database to use a multi-age deployment. Wrong. Even if you deploy to the multi-ag, it is not going to stop you for the deletion. Create a CloudFormation stack set for the web application and the database deployments. No, stack set is used to deploy into the multiple regions. It is not going to prevent the deletion. Add a CloudFormation delete retain policy attribute within a retain value to the stack. So totally wrong because we set the retain or delete policy retain for the resource, not for the stack. So this is also wrong. So what are the remaining options correct? A and B. Question number 37. A company has an S3 bucket that contains sensitive data. The data must be encrypted in transit and at a rest. So while it's stored into the S3 bucket, at that time it should be encrypted. And when someone is going to read the data or while we are put the data, it should be encrypted. The company encrypts the data in S3 bucket by using a KMS key. The developer needs to grant several other AWS accounts the permission to use the S3 get object operation to retrieve the data. How can the developer enforce that all the requests to retrieve the data provide encryption in transit? Because we have to make sure that the data should be encrypted in transit and rest. All right. And all the AWS accounts or maybe any services trying to use this operation S3 get object. So when they are getting the object, how we can make sure whenever get object condition is coming, all right? So So when the data will be going to travel, all right, it should be encrypted. So what we can do is, so whenever the GET request is coming, whether it is coming via the secure layer or not. So if it is coming via the secure layer, just allow the access, otherwise deny the access. All right. So that we can check. Define a resource-based policy in S3 bucket to deny the access when a request made the condition secure transport false. Looks correct. So if the secure transport is false, like whenever you are requesting something, and you are requesting in using HTTP, which is not secure, right? Uh, if it is not secure, then how it can be encrypted? If it is not secure, right? So uh, it means AWS secure parameter is false, and within the S3 bucket, we can make a condition. If it is false, just deny the access. Looks correct. Define a resource-based policy S3 bucket to allow access. Totally wrong, because we have to make sure data should be encrypted while transit. So we have to like make like data provide encryption in transit. So if it is going to access using like a non-secure, do we need to give the access? No. So B is totally wrong. Define the role-based policy on the other account roles to deny access. No, we have to define the resource-based policy. Define the resource-based policy on the KMS key. No, we need to define the resource-based policy on the S3 bucket. So A is correct. Question number 38. An application that is hosted on EC2 instance needs access to files that are stored into S3 bucket. So is application is running on EC2, and that application want to access the file into S3 bucket. The application lists the object that are stored in S3 bucket and display a table to the user. During testing, the developer discovered that the application does not show any object. So what could be the reason? If application is not showing any object, it means some permission issue, because EC2 is trying to connect with the S3 bucket. So it means the instance role attached to the EC2 doesn't have the list permission. What is the most secure way to resolve the issue? Update the IAM instance profile that is attached to the EC2 to include a S3 star permission. Definitely, yes, this is going to resolve the permission, but this is not a secure way, because S3 star means you are giving all the S3 permission, even the deletion permission. This is not a most secure, even though this is going to resolve the problem. Update the instance profile attached to the EC2 instance to include the S3 list bucket permission. Totally correct. So list bucket means like it's not listing your bucket, that is a list buckets operation. List bucket also going to list the objects as well. So we are facing this issue that the object within the bucket is not going to list, so we can give only this permission rather than S3 star. Update the developer user permission. No, we have to update the IAM permission, IAM role permission, because the developer is not accessing, EC2 is accessing. Update the S3 bucket policy. No. So B is correct. Question number 39. A company is planning to securely manage one-time fixed license key. So there is a license key, maybe we get from somewhere, and that is just a one-time fixed license key. So that is fixed. It means it is not going to be rotated, and we need to secure into AWS. The company development team needs to access the license key in automation script, and company want to access that license key in their EC2 instances. What is the most secure way and cost effective? Most cost effective. So basically, these kind of secrets we can store in the secret manager along with the SSM. So let's figure it out. Amazon S3, totally wrong. AWS secret manager with the tag that is named secret. Yes, secret manager is correct. AWS system manager parameter with the uh, with a string called secure string parameter, totally correct. Cloud formation no echo parameter, totally wrong. So B and C looks correct. But what is the most cost effective? Because it is a one time fixed. So it means you don't need to rotate. So if you don't need to rotate, there is no need to use the secret manager, because secret manager has more cost. So we can use the SSM parameter. So C is correct. Question number 40. A company has deployed infrastructure on AWS. The development team wants to create an AWS Lambda function that will receive the data from Aurora database. So Lambda is going to wants the data from the Aurora database. The Amazon Aurora database in the private subnet, but the database is in the private subnet. So if some resource into the private subnet, how the Lambda is going to access, right? The VPC is named VPC1. The data is relational in nature. The Lambda function need to access, yes. So your database into the private subnet, and now the Lambda function wants to access. I, uh, so when we create a Lambda, so there is an option called, okay, where you want to deploy the Lambda. So if if the Lambda, if you want to access any resource which is in the VPC, the Lambda should also be in the VPC. So one thing is that along with that, because Lambda is one service, database another service, if Lambda wants to access the database, the security groups, right? It has the security group permission, inbound and outbound role. So create a Lambda function, okay. Configure VPC1 access for the function, yes, because that function should also be in the VPC. Otherwise, how we can enter into someone private subnet? Attach a security group named SG1 to both the Lambda function and the database. Okay. Configure the security group inbound and outbound policy to allow TCP traffic to port 3306. Okay. Let's see. Uh, create and launch a Lambda function in a new public subnet. No, if you are going to create in the public subnet, it's not going to. It can access create a VPC pairing. Totally wrong. No need to do this. We can just deploy the Lambda function. Also, like in public is strong, because when database is in private, you are deploying to the public Lambda function and anyone can access that, right? So wrong. Create a Lambda function, configure VPC1 access, correct. Assign a security group SG1 to the Lambda function. Assign a second security group SG to the database, okay. Add an inbound rule to SG1 to allow TCP traffic from port 3306. So they said allow the inbound rule to SG1. Wrong. We need to allow the inbound rule to the SG2, because Lambda is trying to access to the database and database security group is SG2. So something is wrong. We need to add an inbound rule to SG1. Okay, let's read. So B is totally wrong. Export the data base to the Amazon S3. Totally wrong. D is wrong. So out of A and C is correct. But which one is correct? Let's go through that. Till this point, it's correct. We can create a function to VPC. Add a security group name SG1 to both the Lambda function and database. Configure the security group inbound and outbound rule to allow TCP traffic on port 330. So this looks correct. Assign a second security group name. Okay. Here we assign two different security groups. Okay. And add an inbound rule. But we need to add an outbound inbound rule to the SG2, because if we are not going to add anything to the security group 2, how the database is going to give the access to any service, right? So that security group should know, okay, whoever is coming, whether it's kind of firewall, whoever is coming to which service or to which security group I want to give access. C looks wrong, A looks correct to me. Yeah, A looks correct. Many people said C, but like C is not the correct answer. So if you see, yeah, so the rule should allow traffic to SG2, all right, from SG1, not the other way around. All right, so A looks correct. So that's it. That's the end of the video, and thank you.